episode of Chatty Broads with Becca and Jess.
Well, hello, broads.
Good morning.
Good morning or afternoon or evening or whenever you're watching this or listening. Broads, we've been talking a lot of pop culture lately.
First of all, have you voted for us yet? I'm going to start making it like a thing where every single time we hop on, I'm like, hey, so... Yes,
Thank you.
so if you haven't voted for us yet for whatever we're nominated for, do it now, please.
Please. But we've been doing the pop culture. We've had some great episodes. We were doing the GOAT episodes, and the last GOAT episode we did was Nick Viall's episode. And in this episode...
Are they over now, by the way? Was Nick's the last one?
No, Juan Pablo's was.
Oh, yeah.
And when we watched Nick's, my most favorite moment by a mile was when we saw Taylor Nolan speaking to Chris Harrison and had the most legendary dialogue that I believe has ever happened. I mean, in general, we heard about some non-monogamy, we heard about vibrators, we heard about transgender. I mean, it was such a moment. So of course, I mean, we have to talk about this before we dive into other things. Taylor Nolan, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Oh, so happy to see you. Can we talk about this for a minute?
Yeah. I remember getting your message. You had DM'd me when you were watching it, and I was so scared and terrified. It didn't feel like it was going to be that big of a deal, but it also I felt really nervous at the same time, even saying it am I allowed to use these words here? Am I allowed to do this? And before going on, I was just every time I see Chris Harrison, I'm triggered trauma. and so I was okay, how do I not shrink down and just be this small, agreeable, weird version of myself out of fear?
Right.
And I think it helped just being in my apartment, feeling like I'm in my safe space and I don't give a fuck. I'm on Zoom and I'm still going to be myself. So it was interesting. Definitely made him super uncomfortable. And he was like, oh, no. I'm totally comfortable with this. I was like, okay.
Sure. He's just non-monogamy.
Wait, do you have any theories of why they didn't edit it? Did they edit any of it down?
Yeah, I mean, the interview itself is 25-ish minutes.
Uh-huh. Sure.
Yeah, but I think that they left it in. We did talk about some race stuff.
Yeah.
I know that they didn't necessarily want to talk about race stuff. There was a lot of stuff from my season that I wish that they would have left in, the MAGA paraphrasing that they left out. But, I think that they did want to make an opportunity to have some sex positivity on there. I think that's something that they've been leaning into with Jamie and then Demi. And, I think that they do see the benefit of that. So I think that's why they left that part in. But I don't think that there was anything from me talking about that section of stuff about exploring non-monogamy and exploring my sexuality and who I'm attracted to. I don't that was basically the conversation with that little bit of me being Chris, I think I'm making you uncomfortable, and being oh, no, I'm totally comfortable.
I'm cool. I'm hip with
fine.
it.
Yeah.
I mean, I was so glad that they at least kept that in. But like Becca was saying, I mean, I was shocked. I was so surprised, but so grateful.
Yeah. I mean, it felt very, I don't know. In a way, it felt very liberating to just be this is where I'm at, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it or make it more appealing to your audience so I don't rub any feathers the wrong way. I was so nervous. I messed up my wording in one part. And then afterwards, when I watched it back, I was oh, that's not what I meant. I think it was when I was saying exploring, that relationships don't have to look like a fairy tale way of being heterosexual and monogamous. But I think I said non-monogamous. And I was beating myself up for a hot minute over that. And I was people know what you meant, Taylor.
No. I didn't even track. I heard monogamous because I was just standing up cheering. I was in that
Yeah. I was very, very nervous though, but I was like, okay, this is my truth. So I was told, it's okay for me to talk about these things. And so I was like, all right, here we go.
Oh my God. Well,
Did you get any heat from it after? Anyone like messaging you or anything like that?
I didn't really. Like, there were a few people that were like, that was inappropriate, and that people felt embarrassed for me talking about vibrators. I'm like, that's not embarrassing, but okay, it is for you, I guess. Like, if it was embarrassing for me, I maybe wouldn't have said it, but like, I said that with confidence. It's not embarrassing. It was really small. I mean, I remember, I think, like, honestly, like, it's weird to even talk about it as if it was like this big thing, because it didn't feel like it was a big thing. Like, I don't know if just no one was watching the show.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's probably like 200 viewers, just in general watching these GOAT episodes, but...
Yeah, because like,
we watch.
It didn't really feel like it was that big of a thing. Like, I think like if I had shown up as myself fully in that space, like on Paradise or something, then I think that would have been more of a thing. But this really didn't feel like a thing at all.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And that's like when I got your message that you were like, oh my God, legendary. I was like, what's happening? Like, I was like preparing myself a little bit to be like, this could be really big that you said these things, and like almost like fear just of being on the show again, of like scared that, it's going to be all this attention and that all these people are going to have all this shit to say. And like, I don't want to deal with that. Like, that's like really nerve wracking. That's like, I like my community of people that I have that are like, in the same vibe length and, vibe wavelength. And
I like that vibe length.
Vibe length. But yeah, it really didn't feel like it was a thing. I didn't really get a lot of hate on it. I definitely did receive some like positive messages and comments and stuff, but it wasn't like this big thing.
I think it probably would have been if it was on like a normal Bachelor episode. Yeah. I don't think that stuff is normally acknowledged on like, it's kind of seems, I gotta say, it kind of seems with the GOAT episodes, it's like anything goes. No one's really watching, unfortunately, because I think that would have been crazy if they're, I mean, I don't even think non-monogamy has even been brought up, period, on any of the normal episodes.
Which is like mind-blowing to me, because like every season the top two was like, oh my God, I'm in love with two people. Like, I would have never imagined that this could have happened. And like, oh, who do I have to choose now? And it's like, well, hello, like, you can have a different form of relationship if this is really where you're at. Like, why don't you all have some conversations?
Right. I was at a certain point, I was waiting for maybe Pilot Pete to say something like that. I was like, if anyone's going to say it, I can see Pilot Pete and then Barb being supportive of it.
Pete just like having a like revelation where he's just sitting there like, wait, why can't I keep loving both?
Yeah. Yeah. Even on Paradise, like when we see like, multiple people dating and whatnot, it's like, okay, well, is there a way where this works for all parties involved? Like, it's definitely, I think, disappointing that it's never been a conversation. I know on my season of Paradise, there was just so much pressure. And I think that's part of why conversations around non-monogamy don't happen on the show, because there is such this fucking pressure of just, as soon as you kiss someone, y'all are together. Oh my God, y'all are going to be the next Jade and Tanner. Oh my God, y'all are going to have babies like Carly and Evan. And it's like, whoa, can we take a breather here? Like, I'm still available. Like, he's still available. Like, we can still go out on dates with other people. But it just like, immediately, the whole environment is like bred on monogamy.
Although at the same time, though, I have to counter that and say that the whole show, the premise of it is actually non-monogamy, and also it is to date throughout 8 weeks. I mean, the only thing is, of course, that the ultimate goal is the monogamy, but the whole show is about consensual relationships with multiple people at once. And the conversations that are always had is like, well, I just have to keep exploring this for myself. Whenever someone gets jealous or something and is, I don't like you being with other girls, the conversation is always like, well, like, that's just kind of the way it is. Like, it's kind of crazy. And it's and it's been normalized for like 20 years, but it's just, there's never been there's never been an ending where there's not monogamy in the end, which is really interesting. Yeah, you're right. Pete is the one that got the closest to it. But like the whole show is built upon non-monogamy.
But I think too, it's, at least for Paradise, it's only in my perspective, it seems only encouraged and acceptable when you are at those beginning stages of dating. That once you develop deep feelings for one person, then that's just who you're with. And then it becomes of like, okay, well, now you can't date any of these other more people because now you've developed something really strong with this one person. And that's the whole point, quote unquote.
And you're like, honey, I've been here for a week and a half. I don't know. Like, can I have still an option, or do I have to fully commit for the rest of my life?
Yeah. And I think too, even though like we see people in ITMs talk about, like that's the whole point, we're supposed to date around, like, when you're there, people do put that pressure on monogamy. I mean, if I think back to my season, Lacey went on one date with Diggy. I was like, I think Dom and Diggy would hit it off. Diggy then goes out on a date with Dom, and Lacey's like, fucking devastated because she thought her and Diggy were going to have a thing, right? So I think that there is kind of an unspoken pressure of monogamy, even though everyone knows that you're also there to date around. Like, I think a lot of people on the show don't have experience in non-monogamy to begin with, and that the versions of dating around aren't consensual that they've practiced outside of the show, right? And that it's really like kind of a closed door on that. So to have that all happening like in your face, like directly, I think brings up a lot of those emotions around jealousy and whatnot that folks in the poly and the consensual non-monogamous community process and work through on a regular basis are so new and so like conflictual. Is that a word? I'm making it one on Paradise, because those are things that just spark this immense amount of intensity and in a way, embarrassment, humiliation, because you're on national TV and you're wanting this person to want you and all these things. So it's like, well, there's also, I was just gonna
say, there's also the aspect of the show too that reinforces it, because you need someone to pick you if you want to stay for the next week. So there's also that pressure too, so of like, if you don't have your secure person, you might be worthless. You might be going home.
Yeah, true. That is a good point too, because it's not like you can be like, well, I want to give my rose to this person and this person.
Yeah.
Or this person this week and that person next week, it's like,
oh yeah, it's like once you give your rose to one person, then if you switch it up, you're just like, oh my God, she did what?
Or you might not get a rose the next week.
Right.
And you might go home.
But it is also this like, given this assumption of, well, I got a rose from this person this week, so therefore I'm going to continue to have this person as someone I can rely on to keep me here because they chose me here, aka they're going to continue to choose me. This is my assumption of monogamy, right? That's maybe even unconscious. That's like, I've been chosen, I'm in.
Right.
And it's like, well, no, that's got to be an ongoing conversation, boo.
One of my favorite things with Paradise is when you see the couples who immediately like get together and then just assume that they're just going to stay together, obviously, because they feel like they don't have another choice. And you just see week to week them being like, I don't want to be in this relationship anymore. And the rose every single episode, they're just like, here you go. And they're just not talking to each other in the morning and like already drinking very early. And you're like, well.
Yeah, which is like unfortunately sort of metaphorical for life. Sad, but I was just thinking about like that fear of not getting a rose next week is like really kind of symbolic of what so many of us experience in our life, where like fear of being alone, fear of not having a date to take to the wedding, fear of like, it's like maybe it's easier to pick one person and just stick with it. Not because that's what we actually want, but because it provides a sense of security so we don't have to deal with our fears.
Absolutely. Yeah. Monogamy definitely has this element of security and stability. And I think a big misconception around non-monogamy is that it doesn't have that. I think in consensual non-monogamous relationships, you can still have that security. You can still have that stability, but it just looks a little bit different.
Well, because there's not fear of, I feel like there's, from what I've experienced through other people, I feel like there's not so much of a fear. People have to deal with their fear of being alone, you know, or fear of being left or abandoned. And so it's more of a conscious choice because you're not operating on like a fear-based level. Not that everyone who's in a monogamous relationship is operating around fear. That's not what I mean.
I mean, it's a generalization that I think is very appropriate and accurate. But yeah, I think in consensual non-monogamous relationships, there's more of an element of like choice and like more selfless kind of a love, at least from like my experience, that I think has been lacking in the monogamous relationships that I've been in, where it does feel like, okay, we're just together now and that's it. Like we did it, we're together. And now there might be fear of, well, what is it going to be like when I'm just by myself again? Oh, well, I'm going to stay in this relationship now because I'm scared of what I'm going to look like or who I'm going to be without this. Right. Mm-hmm. Whereas like, I think in consensual non-monogamous relationships, at least in my experience, it's felt more like we know every day that we're choosing to be with each other because we also know that we have the freedom and the choice to be with other people through that agreement and through that conversation and consent, right? So it's, I think it brings a whole other set of conversations and fears, right? But I think I've at least been able to maintain more of my own individual identity and feel like my individual identity has been honored and respected and loved deeper and in a more whole way than it has been in what has felt like forced monogamous relationships that I've been in.
Okay, well, broads, we got to pause for a second. But, we're talking, Taylor is out here helping with the mental health, the sexual health. So this is a perfect topic to talk about. When was the last time that you prioritized your mental health? Like truly took a breath and did something to make sure you're okay? Because after this year, especially, that's an important question to ask yourself. How am I doing? Of course, you're biased, so I would suggest asking a professional that's actually qualified to help you figure out how you are doing, which, in my opinion, the best, most accessible way to find someone to talk can be through using BetterHelp.
BetterHelp is the online therapy platform you need in your life, and I really mean that. Everyone can benefit from therapy in some way, and BetterHelp is the easiest way to get the help you're looking for. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your very own licensed therapist, and you'll be able to start communicating in less than 48 hours. Their service is available for clients worldwide, and they have a huge range of experts in various specialties, so you can find someone to talk to no matter what you're going through.
And here is the best part. It is affordable. I know from experience how expensive therapy can be. BetterHelp believes that no one should be excluded from getting the help that they need because of finances. And that's why their services are affordable. And they even have financial aid available for those that need it, actually.
BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today. Visit BetterHelp.com/broads. That's better, HELP, and join over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. And for all our Chatty Broads listeners, get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/broads.
So, broads, there's a very good chance that as of late, your home is so much more than a place to rest and recharge at the end of the night. Among a million other things, it could be a school right now, an office, a gym, you name it. This means keeping your space clean and smelling fresh is an absolute necessity. And if you have cats at home that are using a litter box, it's even more important because the last thing anyone wants to smell when they're spending their time indoors is a litter box. Well, Pretty Litter is the best way to keep away the smell of a litter box for good. If you've got cats at home, you're going to want to check it out. Becca has cats, 2 in fact, and that is 100% confirmed, okay? Pretty Litter is better than any other litter that she said she's ever tried. It's ultra absorbent crystals, trap odor instantly, and it's totally dust-free, so you're not going to find those kitten prints all over the house every time your cat visits the litter box. It's also totally safe for your cat and the rest of your family. If you're using conventional litters, you're putting irritants that can aggravate allergies and asthma into your home. With Pretty Litter, you'll always be breathing easy. And the coolest part is that Pretty Litter is designed to change colors to help detect early signs of potential illness in your cats. I'm pet obsessed, and knowing there's products like this available to keep your furry friends healthy is just music to my ears. And Pretty Litter is one of those products that I will go on a full rant and preach about. Even though I don't have cats, I tell everyone about it and have turned all of my kitty-owning friends onto it, and they say that it makes a huge difference. So make the switch to Pretty Litter today by visiting prettylitter.com and use promo code CHATTY for 20% off your first order. That's prettylitter.com, promo code CHATTY for 20% off. prettylitter.com, promo code CHATTY.
Yeah, have you read the book Opening Up?
No, I haven't.
It's really good. I'm reading it right now. And the author basically talks about how the problem with monogamy is not monogamy itself. It's what you're talking about, which is like basically forced monogamy imposed by culture, societal standards, religion, etc. And she talks about how, like, you know, practicing ethical non-monogamy takes choice and, like you're saying, takes conscious effort. And people can have that same thing in monogamy, but there has to be a conscious choice and a conscious effort, so that it's what you're both deciding together, not as sort of an unconscious thing. And so basically what she's saying is, like, you need to put in the same work and effort to make your monogamous relationships like conscious and like ethical in the same way that people have to put in work to make ethical non-monogamous relationships work. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what I was attempting to say on my GOAT episode as well, of like, you have the choice of what kind of relationship you want to have. It does not have to default to monogamy. And I think that is where we encounter a lot of the toxic and dangerous elements of monogamy, is when it's just our default. And it is our default because of society, because of what's been normalized, right? Like, we're not even necessarily taught growing up. We don't necessarily see different versions of what relationships can look like. And so there's almost this kind of inherent shame of like, well, if I'm not in a monogamous relationship, then something must be wrong with me. Then something must be wrong with this relationship. This relationship must not be as strong because we're not monogamous, that he or she or they must not love me enough because they don't only want me. And it's so much to unpack. It's very similar with like our sex education, right? Our relationship education and our sex education. Like, they both really fucking suck.
Right? They're like, this is the one way you can do it.
Yeah. And there's so much to unlearn with both of the relationship and sex education that we receive, because there are so many other ways that we can go about doing things that feel authentic for us, that feel pleasurable for us, that feel safe for us, that we can reach an agreement with our partner, and it not be the standard, the default, the what's been normalized. And it doesn't mean that it's wrong.
Right.
Well, when you were on the GOAT episode, you mentioned that you are now back in school to become a sexologist, which is amazing. I saw that you just are diving in. You're getting your PhD?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I didn't ever think I would go to get my PhD. I thought, I mean, first of all, like, I still have massive student debt from Hopkins from my master's, which is like not fun. And I'm just like, can we cancel this? But yeah, I didn't think I'd ever go back. I thought maybe I would go get like my PsyD. I don't like research at all. I'm not good with like statistics. I fucking hate it. But I absolutely love doing sex therapy, and I absolutely love, like, personally, the process of learning and unlearning around sex education. And, you know, there's not a lot of like regulations around practicing as a sex therapist, or even around like being a sexologist. There are some around being a sex educator, but I just felt like it'd be really important for me to actually get this training and feel a lot more credible in the things I'm doing. So I started off going for my certification to be like certified as a sex therapist. And in like the same amount of time, the same amount of money, essentially, I could get my PhD in it. And the one state where it is actually regulated is in Florida, of all states.
So random.
Yeah, very random. But yeah, so it's a institute that I'm going to, Modern Sex Therapy Institute. And the program is 2 years and it's online. And it's like the first year is just like your coursework. So my first weekend of courses is like this last weekend of September. And then the whole second year is gonna be like my dissertation and supervision and whatnot. So I'm like super pumped, also like a little nervous because I'm like, I'm going back to school. What?
Do you have any idea?
I'm really passionate about.
Do you have any idea what you're going to do your dissertation around?
So I've been starting to kind of think about this because I also hope to maybe like write some kind of a book throughout this process too.
Yeah.
So that I can be like, oh, before I'm 30, I'm a doctor and an author. And, you know, like feel myself a little bit.
Yes.
But yeah, I feel like definitely doing something around like female orgasms or female masturbation. I think that or something around like sex drive. Because I think those are like the two areas that I hear a lot of feedback from people on, whether it's clients or listeners of the podcast or Instagram people. And also just because there's so little research and like, I think really credible people talking about these things. So yeah, I'm thinking maybe somewhere around there, but I'm also like, who knows? I might start this program and then be like, I'm going to do something totally different.
Yeah.
You also have like a really, through yourself and through people you know, you have a really large informal sample group.
Yeah.
For research, which is so cool. Like you look at some of the sample sizes of research, you know, and it's like 800 people and it's pretty sweet. And you can be like, oh my God, I have access to 500,000 women or whatever to, you know, to do some informal research on. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm really excited about it. And there's a sex therapist here in Seattle that's doing the program with me. So I'm like very excited to feel like I have a friend along with me.
Especially since everything's virtual.
Yes,
I can't imagine.
Exactly.
Is the whole PhD program? Oh yeah, I guess because it's in Florida, the whole thing's virtual.
Yeah. So typically they would do it like in different cities. So like for the weekend, you know, you'd go to Florida or you'd go to Austin or whatever to actually like do the courses in person. But yeah, with COVID, it's all online now. So yeah, I do think like for me, when I started off doing like certification for sex therapy, there was just all this online coursework. And that for me, like at a do it your own time thing means like, I'm never going to have time for it. So I love that this is like, you know, a specific time and date that I have to be like online and seeing people and learning. And I fucking loved being in school. Like school was such a huge part of my identity. Like I wanted to get it over with, but I also like loved it. If it wasn't so expensive, I definitely would have stayed in it longer.
I know, especially now that it's all Zoom too. I was like losing my mind this past quarter when I was on Zoom and I'm like, I'm really paying $2,500 for this class. Like that, not anyone could teach on Zoom, but like we could make this so much more affordable. There's literally no overhead costs. Like the professor's definitely not getting each of our $2,000 tuition to teach this class. Nowhere near it. It's absurd.
Yeah. It's very, very silly how expensive school is here. And I wish we would just cancel student debt.
Yes, please.
So I'm like, I would like to be able to buy a house.
Yeah, I would eventually like to not have this debt always here.
Yeah.
So with all of this, was there something in your life that happened or like personally that you started when you started getting maybe involved in non-monogamy or where you became interested? Like, this is what I really want to focus on. Was it a personal journey for you?
I think I've always known. So like my first sex partner, my first boyfriend, he was the first person I ever had like threesomes with. And that was like in high school. And even, I mean, you know, I was young and was like, oh, like he's going to be who I marry. Right. And still in my head, I was always like, even though we're together, like I didn't even have words to be like monogamy or non-monogamy then.
Right.
But I was like, even whoever I'm married is not going to be the one and only person I have sex with for the rest of my life.
You just knew that.
Yeah, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would I do that? No. And really enjoyed having threesomes and having like other people involved as like, you know, an assistant to our sex, right? To just kind of like help us reach other areas. Like it was a very fun experience. Granted, at the time, we're teenagers. We were not having the healthy communication that we needed to have, all this stuff, right? There were certainly some problematic things there, but from then I knew like who I marry is not going to be the one and only person that I have sex with for the rest of my life. And I think, I mean, I didn't fully start to actually like experiment or explore non-monogamous relationships until after feeling like I was completely trapped and forced into a monogamous relationship. There was still always this kind of like, yeah, like, you know, my partner was turned on by the idea of having threesomes, right? But like, there was never full conversations or like a intent on my end of like, well, wait, no, like, can we open this up in a different way that's not just like threesomes and you getting turned on because I'm like making out with another chick? Like, can we do this in a different way? And yeah, I think after my relationship from the show, I so badly wanted freedom. I so badly wanted to feel like my needs and wants were heard in a relationship. And that was really when I got intentional about exploring non-monogamy. And it just felt so good to be with people who were open to having those conversations and open to working through the ego work that's involved in that, especially I think for like identified men, that there's these different stigmas, you know, with being a masculine man, but having your partner be with someone else and like experimented with like cuckolding. Like there's just so much of these other elements that like I felt like my world was just totally opened up to. So I would say definitely like in the last 2 years, I did more so start experimenting personally that made me feel like, yeah, professionally, there needs to be more in this space and I want to explore it.
Were you, when you were like the past 2 years, when you're finding partners, is it something that like, I'm always so interested how like the conversation begins, like how you're meeting someone who then is on board with a consensual, like non-monogamous relationship. Totally. Yeah. How did that work for you?
Yeah. So for both my last two partners, this was like a conversation within our first conversation. This stuff was brought up.
Really?
Yeah. My current partner, in our first conversation, it was him. We were at this like, it's called Fireside, this like conference for startup, like tech. Anyone who's doing something a little bit different is welcome. But it's held at like a camp, Camp Walden. And it's like in Northern Ontario. It's absolutely stunning. And yeah, I started talking to him and he had said, you know, it was his first time there. And basically shared that like he was finding it difficult to have like uncomfortable conversations with people, that he was feeling a little surprised that like people weren't open to having more uncomfortable conversations. And I was like, oh, well, I love having uncomfortable conversations. Like, what do you mean? Like, what kind of things are you trying to talk about? Like, are you just like a hello weirdo? And that's why like people don't want to talk about these things. Like, I was like, what are you trying to talk about? And the first thing he said was like, well, you know, like polyamory and like, you know, veganism. And I was like,
what? You're like,
okay. I was like, well, we can talk about those things.
Wow.
Yeah, that started from first conversation. And even my partner before that, I was kind of coming off of that relationship and saying, you know, I wasn't ready to be in a committed monogamous relationship, but that if we could figure out what would work for both of us, then I would be interested in doing that. So I think at any point that you're dating and like you're starting to have conversations around exclusivity, right? Even before that, I think it's helpful. But if you're like, I don't know, I want to talk about it. Maybe whenever you start talking about exclusivity, like talk about what kind of relationship you actually want, right? Like, and maybe you need to sit with this and think about that and be like, okay, well, do I want this person only? Do I want to be able to flirt with other people, right? Like, when we talk about our being exclusive, rarely are there actually conversations around what exclusivity means.
Yes.
Like, is flirting considered cheating, right? Is sexting considered cheating? Is porn considered cheating, right? Like, I think people should have these conversations and ask each other what monogamy actually means and looks like to them. And so from jump with both my last two partners, it's been a conversation of like, well, what have your past relationships looked like? And, what kind of a relationship are you wanting right now? And how do you feel about me? And well, this is how I feel about you and what I would like to see with us. And is that in alignment? Is it, if it's not, then okay, maybe this isn't the right time. But if it is, then all right, how can we like find a common ground that works for both of us and is something that we're happy with?
It's so interesting because it's like, I think about, my conversations with partners in the past or whatever. And it's like, I will literally, even meeting someone first time, I'm like, I will talk about anything with anybody, but because there hasn't been like, at least, demonstrated in my upbringing or whatever, the conversation, like you said, to talk about what exclusivity means, what does that look like? It's like when I hear you saying it, I'm like, oh my God, this is such a fun conversation to have with someone who you're just like casually starting to date, because it opens up so many other like fun conversations as well. But there is that like, that part of you where you're like, oh, I'm not going to go there because I wasn't taught or trained to do that. But what a fun conversation to have with somebody that you're like casually dating.
Yeah. And also like, I think it is so important because it is such a gray area, like you're saying, is it sexting cheating? Is even like making out with someone?
Such a good point.
By these like standards, I know, and it wasn't right because it wasn't consensual. Haven't done this with Gray, but like in past boyfriends, just FYI, everyone, this isn't tea. Like with past relationships, I 100% have like, though one time it was really bad. I've like sexted other people while I'm dating someone, which like
same.
Yeah, and like
not consensually.
Yeah, and then like a couple times I've like made out with someone drunk at a club, and I've ended up telling the other person, crying to them, and being like, I did this. But like when I think about it, it's like, did I really like feel like I was cheating, or did I stop loving the other person when I did those things? Like, not really. It was kind of just like a different compartmentalized part of my life. Not that it was right because they didn't know about it or consent to it, but it didn't really have anything to do with them at the same time, or didn't have anything to do with any kind of dissatisfaction in the relationship or anything.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's like, I think part of what people work to unlearn in entering into non-monogamy, because I even still today catch myself where I have to be like, okay, yes, interest in someone else does not mean a lack of interest in me. And like really having to like remind yourself of that, because it's so fucking ingrained. It's so ingrained. If that jealousy comes up, to be like, okay, how do I sit with this? But I'm also reminding myself of like, oh, well, when I was with so-and-so, I still really loved and felt strongly for this other person. So like, of course that's okay. And I think for me, one of the most important lessons I've learned of exploring non-monogamy is making sure that I actually feel safe with my partner. And one of my previous partners, I really wasn't respected. I didn't feel like I was really listened to. And so it really actually didn't feel like a safe space for me, which then made his very small activity, but still activity with other people really, really rubbed me the wrong way, because I didn't actually feel safe and feel like I trusted that person, because they had already broken boundaries within our relationship, right? Where they were showing me that they were someone that I couldn't actually trust. So I do think that like doing non-monogamy with someone, it's so important that it's someone you actually feel safe with. It's someone that you feel actually respects you and shows you that, and that upholds those boundaries, right? And if something does happen, because life happens and people are not perfect, but is there actually accountability? Is there acknowledgement, right? Mm-hmm. Is there a deeper conversation and tending towards the impact that you're experiencing on this subject? And looking back for me, none of that existed. And that was where it felt like, okay, it's not non-monogamy that brought us here, right? And it was like, okay, I'm not going to blame and say, oh, well, non-monogamy doesn't work because this person, broke this boundary and I feel disrespected and what have you. But it was that person, me and that person just not meshing well and not having that respect and not having that trust and not having that safety. And I think those are like really, really key components of any relationship, but like especially in a non-monogamous relationship, if you're involving other people as well, like to feel like you have that solid connection still. I think those things are so important for that.
So broads, a smile is everyone's best accessory. You may not be able to see them as often as you want right now, unless you're on Zoom, of course, but someday we will all be able to show our smiles again. And that means now is the perfect time to get working on that smile if that's something you're looking for. For some of us, that means straightening out a smile, which thanks to Candid Clear Aligners has never been simpler, easier, or more comfortable. If you've managed to escape the metal confines of traditional braces as a preteen, thank your lucky stars. They're not fun. And my, how times have changed. Candid Clear Aligners are practically invisible and you can remove them when necessary, okay? The whole treatment is prescribed and monitored remotely by a licensed orthodontist who's an expert in tooth movement. Your teeth are under the best care from start to finish. And unlike traditional braces, Candid Clear Aligners are affordable, okay? Costing thousands less than traditional braces. Braces are expensive and Candid Clear Aligners are so affordable. And the best part is the average treatment is just 6 months, which flies by when you're getting the smile you've always dreamed of. All I can say is I so wish that Candid Clear Aligners were around when I was younger and had wire braces. It wasn't the best time for me, It was very uncomfortable and it lasted many years. Not like Candid. Candid Clear Aligners are that zero pain game, baby. So start straightening your teeth today. Right now, all our listeners can save $75 on Candid Starter Kit. Just go to candidco.com/chatty and use code chatty. That's candidco.com/chatty. Promo code chatty. Take advantage of this limited time offer to save $75 on your starter kit. That's candidco.com/chatty, code chatty. Well, if you watched the news, read social media, or looked out your window the last week, you probably know that the entire West Coast was on fire, resulting in some of the worst air quality in the world. I have never, ever in my life been more thankful for my air purifier. That is a fact. Of course, I'm talking about my Molekule, which if you listen to us regularly, you know I've loved my Molekule for forever. But let me tell you, last week, I experienced a different type of love for my Molekule. Molekule is not your typical air purifier either. They've literally developed a new technology in air purification that destroys harmful pollutants in the air like viruses, bacteria, mold, and chemicals instead of just collecting them in the filters, which inevitably just leak back out onto your space. So in fact, Molekule air purifiers actually destroy the widest range of pollutants compared to every other air purifier on the market. It's amazing. And just because it's a piece of functional equipment doesn't mean that it has to not be aesthetically pleasing. Molekule products literally look like the Scandinavian minimalist tech product of your dreams. Mwah, they're gorgeous. And by that, I mean they look nothing like the air purifiers that you might be used to seeing. That means you can have them out in the open to do their job instead of shoving them in the corner hoping that they're still effective. They have multiple size options available as well, perfect for small spaces like home office or a kid's room or large rooms up to 600 square feet. What a relief it was to have them in my house the last few weeks. And I was seeing such a huge difference. The moment that I would turn them off, my house would start to smell like smoke. And I'm talking about within a minute. Turn them back on, in 60 seconds, boom, the air was clear. It was amazing. Thank you, Molekule. For 10% off your first air purifier order, visit molekule.com and enter code chatty at checkout. That's molecule.com. Enter code chatty at checkout for 10% off your first air purifier order.
Yeah, and I was thinking when you were saying how it's been so deeply ingrained for us to feel threatened, you know, by maybe someone is, you know, going to care more about this person than me or whatever. Yeah. I think a big issue with that is because anytime that's happened to us in relationships or in relationships proximity to us, it means that relationship therefore has to end when there's more interest in another person. And I think that's like a big reason, because I was thinking about it sort of in my head, like, why do I feel threatened or like upset about this person or like about my partner wanting to? So for me, just personally, like the sex thing doesn't bother me so much if I was to be in a non-monogamous relationship. But I think about like if my partner was to stay up super late talking on the phone with someone else, that like the thought of that kind of is like, freaks me out. I'm like, oh my God. And because to me, when I unpack it, it's like maybe this person, maybe my partner will like this person more than me, and then therefore choose to end the relationship with me so that they can spend all of their time with this new person, which I guess like could be a valid fear.
No, it's a totally valid fear.
But yeah, and could be like a realistic fear. But it's just so interesting to think about like how the root of it is worrying that necessarily means the end of what we have, and like end of spending any time together potentially.
Yeah. Well, and I think when your partner does find someone new, that oftentimes there is a little bit of an increase in the quantity of time that person spends with that person, right? And probably the same thing would happen for you with someone new too.
Or with your friends, you know, when you start dating a new person, you stop hanging out with your friends all the time because you're infatuated with this new person.
Totally. Yeah. So like part of that is maybe like perspective, right? And I think another part is like communicating your needs, right? So you might be able to communicate to your partner like, hey, you know, I do start to feel really uneasy, you know, when you start to have these really like long conversations on the phone with so-and-so, like I would feel really cared for if you could make sure to schedule a date night for us sometime this weekend, right? Yeah. Or whatever it is, you know, I would love if you would, you know, increase your words of affirmation or something to just say like, I might need some reassurance right now. I'm really happy for you and I want you to experience this however you need to, and I support you. However, I'm feeling a little uneasy. I'm feeling a little disconnected from you, and I really want to make sure that we do come back to us, right? And if that is your primary relationship, then I better hope that partner is on board with that, right? And wants to provide that reassurance for you and wants to say, yes, no, of course, I do love you and I do care about you. And, you know, yes, like we're going to do something together. And I so appreciate you supporting me in this. And, you know, just again, reassuring from all those things that we need to unlearn, right? Of I'm really enjoying talking to this person and I still really love and care about you. Hearing those things, I think, helps create new pathways and new connections in our brains, right? From all these things that are so ingrained.
Yeah, it's so interesting because it's like, even if someone's not interested in having a non-monogamous relationship, these are such great practices to just have to make sure that you're not codependent in a relationship.
Yeah, toolkits.
Like the idea of being like, I need to have, like, for example, like I would like to have friends, you know, of the opposite sex, and or I want to make sure that I have time where I have friends and I get away, I go on vacations where I'm not necessarily with you. Like I need time and space to make sure that we're not codependent, that I have my own independence, even if we're not going to have a, you know, consensual non-monogamous relationship, just a good practice to keep yourself whole.
Totally. I said this on Paradise about like the puzzle pieces thing, where I was like, I don't want someone to just like, you know, fill up my missing puzzle piece. Like I'm my own puzzle, and then like you're your own puzzle. Maybe like our colors complement each other, but I've like upgraded that kind of analogy now to like a Venn diagram. So like you're your own full circle, your partner's own full circle, but then like you have this in between where you come together, right? And I think if you start to lose that part of your circle, right? And it starts to open up and now it's just like that one full circle. I think that's where you start to lose that part of your own individual identity. And I think that is typically what we start to experience in monogamous relationships, that this person is your everything. They're your everything. And you become their everything. And I remember I started talking about this like a year and a half ago, and people were so upset by this. And people were like, you are not, like, your partner doesn't care about you. You don't like your partner enough. Literally, that they were like, well, they're not the one for you then.
If you don't want to spend all your time with this person, then they're not like the one.
Yeah, I was like, well, my husband is my everything for the last 25 years. And, you know, you just haven't found the right one yet. And it's like, no, I don't want one person to be my everything. They might be a lot of things for me, right? But I still am my everything. And I still have a bunch of other people in my life that help influence and impact and contribute to who I am. And I also have my needs met by many of these other people in my life that I don't want to put that pressure on my partner to be like, no, you are all I have. And you need to be there, you know, 1,000,000% of the time for me. And I'm going to be there 1,000,000% of the time for you. Like, it's so, when you really step back and think about it, like, it's not helpful for your partner and it's really not helpful for you. And it's like, blows my mind when I think back to like being in monogamous relationships where it did feel like, oh my gosh, like I have to be absolutely everything for this person, which in turn made me not actually show up as my whole everythingness of myself. Which then it's like, okay, so then who is that partner loving now? Because this really isn't the full version of me, because now it's just me fully showing up in all the ways for this person.
Yeah. Oh no. I mean, I've been with the same person for 14 years, and I will say this. When there was many years of that mindset of we're each other's everything, you know, expecting that, we were so unhealthy and we were smothering each other. The amount, at least for us, the amount of arguing, expectations. It just, it sucked so much joy out of our relationship. And just in the past few years, have we been able to transition where it's like, no, I can't expect that from you. And we adore each other, but we're sucking the life out of each other because we're not allowing the other person to be their own independent being. And it's so funny now, like people who have met us later in our relationship, like let's just say in the past 5 years, are like, oh my God, you guys are so good together. You're so healthy. It's so sweet. I'm like, yeah, I feel great now, but you could have checked us out a few years back and it was a mess. And at that time, I would have told you my husband's my everything. He's the only thing I have. But inside, it was just a disaster. And I had so much anxiety because I put all these expectations on him and myself to show up in those ways.
And I want to acknowledge for some people too who might be feeling like a little bit like, it is hard sometimes. Like, I'm thinking of one of my friends in particular, like, if you have like a husband who's in the military, for example, and you're moving all the time and you don't have a solid family unit or like childhood best friends just because of your situation. Like, I do want to acknowledge that there's situations where it's like, sometimes that the only person you got is your partner. And like, while that's not ideal, I do feel like sometimes that's the only like option that people have. Not necessarily, but it's like when you have kids, you know, how are you going to go out and like make friends, and then you're moving like in 5 months anyway. Granted, that's like a really small percentage of the experience, but
well, I mean, my mom was in that. My stepdad was in the Air Force, and we had to move, you know, every like, you know, middle school, elementary school, high school, we're moving. And he was deployed shortly after 9/11, was deployed for about 9 months. And, you know, I was in like middle school at the time, and we had just moved to a new place. And my mom was still working then for about a year. But, you know, I know that for her, it did feel like me and her husband were her everything. And she was not in a happy, healthy place then, like at all. And I do think even when it feels like, okay, this is all I have because I'm in a new place and I have kids and my husband is away and all this stuff. Like, there still has got to be a way. There still has got to be a way that you can lean on family, that you can, the internet now is such a big fucking place, right? That you can find groups of people, that you can, find those moments to have that are for you. And I know, I'm not a parent. I know that that's like very, very fucking difficult at times. And there might be phases, right, where you go through that and you're like, I literally have not checked in with myself in months and I've lost sight of that. And I would definitely encourage people, like, don't beat yourself up about it. Like, when you're at that spot and you can realize that and have awareness of that, try to be intentional about it in the smallest of moments, where maybe even it just feels like you have yourself. I just did a recording with this woman who does healing of trauma through like body movement, through like sensual, spiritual, like dancing. And we walked through this, like, even if you have 5 minutes in the bathroom with yourself, right? And she walked me through this like beautiful, like almost meditation kind of thing. And just got me thinking more about like movement and how that is how we come back to ourselves. And even with movement, I mean stillness as well, right? Like listening to our body, being in our body. And I think you can find moments where 2 minutes in the bathroom with yourself, right? Where you're either still or you're moving around, where you're practicing self-compassion and you're coming back to you. And I think that's even in like the smallest of ways that you can kind of practice grounding yourself and knowing that, okay, your husband might be deployed, your kid might be having a, 30-minute nap and you're like anticipating, oh shit, they're going to wake up and then I got to feed them and blah, blah, blah. But where you can kind of have your own back, right? And you can kind of like lift yourself up as much as you can. This might sound like really woo-woo and like, bitch, you know what I'm talking about. But I do think that there's space in those super small moments even to kind of like refine your circle and your Venn diagram and feel like you can be part of your everything.
Yeah, carving out a chunk of whatever time you can. I was also thinking as you were talking, sometimes it's like you were talking about the internet. I was just thinking to myself that you can find sometimes a one-sided outlet to get support from other people, even if they don't know you. I was thinking about podcasts and how sometimes when I'm driving, I'll listen to a podcast that's maybe more of like a self-help aspect, or that could be an outlet for someone to go for a walk and listen to a podcast. The person might not know who you are, but you're gaining support from someone other than your partner. To have like a bit of an outlet to have your own space in a relationship with someone else, even if it's just a one-sided relationship.
It's funny you bring up the podcast because I was just about to say, like, I know for me personally, when my daughter was 6 months old, my husband was like on the road mostly for music, and I was home alone with her, and she was 6 months, and we just moved to Los Angeles, and I didn't have any friends in LA, and I felt so like Evan's my everything. And I was still in that, and it was coming back a little bit too because I was just felt like so lonely. I'm like, Evan's my everything, da 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 da, and I didn't have it in me because of having the little 6-month-old to be like, I'm going to reach out to random people and whatever.
Totally.
So I started listening to podcasts. It was Pete Holmes, You Made It Weird for Me, that like got me in this great headspace. But he became like, this guy who doesn't know me became like my best friend. And I became my own person by realizing that I have a certain set of beliefs that are different than my husband's. And I allowed myself to feel that way and feel free in that way. And that was, for me, all that it took in that moment was to be like, oh, you believe this spiritually? I don't. And I'm finally free to say like, no, we're two different people, and that's okay. And we don't have to sit there and fight about it. It's like, that's just what I believe, and I'm not going to agree with you, and we're fine. Cool. And that felt like enough.
A sense of autonomy and like independence.
Exactly. Yeah. And even if it's not like support necessarily, I think it's also like interests that are like individual to you, right? And, I mean, it could still be shared with your partner, but that you're doing those things on your own, that you're exploring those things on your own, right? Even like reading a book, right? Like doing something, doing some kind of like yoga practice or dance practice, right? Like I was thinking about this for myself last night. I had like a mini dance party in my apartment by myself. And I was thinking like, oh, like when my partner's here, if they're here for a longer extended period of time, I might really miss having these moments for myself that help me just kind of get back grounded to who I am, and was like, how can I make time? How can I create that moment where I have the apartment to myself on a Friday night and I can blast my music as loud as I want, dance around in my apartment and give no fucks about anything. I was like, how can this feels so important for me when I'm solo, and I don't want to lose that when I'm also partnered. So I think even for people getting into relationships, to consider what those things are and how you experience your individuality, and being intentional about still experiencing that in a partnered relationship.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
So this is a kind of it makes sense, this transition, but can we talk about your sex vacations? Because Taylor, when you posted about, and then I went through your whole highlight reel, and you were talking about that you had taken yourself on a sex vacation, and I was like, I am fully sucked in, and I became obsessed. Can you talk to us about this? Because this, when I started to read all your highlights, I was like, if I could go back to like young, like, 20-something-year-old Jess and teach her this, I feel like it would have been so fantastic. So
yeah, and I haven't I'm not exactly sure what you're talking about.
Oh my God.
I'm ready to hear.
Tell us, please.
Yeah, so sexcation is what I've called it. A sexcation was basically like, I want to have a lot of sex with this person. We're gonna plan a trip. We're gonna have a trip together, and we're just gonna ravage the fuck out of each other.
Yes.
I'm coming prepared with the lube, with the condoms, with the toy, with all the things. I'm coming prepared. He's coming prepared, and we're just gonna sex it up. And like, these were conversations before the trip, right? This was intentional. And it was interesting, like.
So this is with someone who's, it's like, just for the listeners, this is not like, oh, this is my boyfriend. Like, this is someone who you've just, connected with, and you're like.
So, I mean, I've somewhat talked about this on my Instagram a bit, and I think if people like can connect the dots, but yeah, the partner that I just had talked about, of like that uncomfortable conversation right off the bat, like we met there that weekend for like 2 days, and then talked a bit afterwards, and then was like, we want to see each other, and basically just like, we want to fucking ravage each other. So planned a trip like a month later, and the whole intention behind it. I mean, for me, I was like, I'm not in a place where I want to be in a long-term relationship or a committed relationship. Had just gotten out of one, but was like, my God, this man is so fine. I was like, literally struggling to just have a conversation looking at him, because I was like, oh my God, like, be on me, please, get on me all over. And the feeling was mutual, and he wasn't looking for something that was committed or, any kind of like back and forth. Again, I mean, he's in Toronto. So it was like, we just want to get together. We just want to have a fun time. We just want to ravage each other. So let's plan it out. And when I shared it, it was just like, I think I was leaving. Maybe I was going into the country. I don't remember, but I was going through customs, and like the border patrol guy just looked like he was not having a good day. And he's like, oh, like, what brings you here? Or what brought you here? And I was like, sexcation. And he was like, what? And I was like, a sexcation. And he was like, what is okay. And I was like, yeah, just like a visit, like for sex. And it brought like a small smile to his face. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, any other questions, sir? But like, just shared that, because I was like, that was kind of funny. And it was funny. People really thought, they were like, oh, like, you're bragging about having sex and like blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you know what? Women have been so suppressed about talking about and experiencing their sexuality. This isn't me bragging, but sure, why not? Maybe I should be fucking bragging, just so that women can feel empowered in talking about their sex experiences. So that maybe their needs and their wants can actually be explored and expressed and respected. So I basically shared it like that. And then, it kind of became like okay, let's do another sexcation. Okay, let's do a sexcation in this location. And one of my favorite parts about even me sharing this was like, I had a woman, and like many people messaged me with this, but this woman in particular, like really like got my heart. She's like in her 40s and was recently divorced and had met a guy, I think it was like also international, and had met him, and she was like, I was really like empowered by your sexcations. And like, I talked to, this guy that I'm interested in about this. And, I got myself all prepared and got my bag with like my sexy lingerie and my condoms and my lube and all this. And she was like, she had messaged me before she went and then also afterwards and was like, it was such a good time. I experienced so much pleasure. We had amazing communication around this, and was just like, thank you. And I was like,
oh my goodness.
That's amazing. I was so happy that you had a great sexcation. But I think that like the interesting part about, essentially a sexcation is like a form of casual relationship. And I put casual in like air quote because it also kind of implies like a hierarchy of sex. And I'm still figuring that part out, but it implies, unfortunately, that like it's emotionless or that you don't have feelings for that person. And for me, even on that first sexcation, we didn't have sex the first night, but that morning after we had sex and we went out for like coffee and tea and stuff, we were walking down the street and he's like holding my hand. And in my head, I was like, we shouldn't be doing this because this is a sexcation.
Right.
Why?
Right.
Like,
we're not committed. Like, this is not.
I draw the line. Yeah.
I was like, you're going to get me in my feels right now. And like, I don't know about that because like, this is strictly this.
Totally.
And I'd asked him about it. I was like, you're holding my hand. And he was like, yeah, like he had already communicated. He's very affectionate physically. And he was just like, yeah, like I like doing this with you. And like, it felt right to do, and, it was making you uncomfortable. And then we had kind of like had a conversation about it, and where I was like, I don't want to reject this. Like, I really enjoy my time with you. I feel really respected by you. I feel really safe with you. I understand the boundaries of this, and I know I'm not ready for a committed relationship right now, but maybe there's a way where I can let this in and just have this be a part of like increasing my pleasure and increasing our connection.
Yeah. Which
also then increases like our sex because we're having that dialogue and we're understanding each other better and understanding our bodies. So it was like, yeah, we were having sexcations, but they weren't void of feelings. Like we held space for those feelings too. And we're very fond of each other and had a lot of like admiration and respect for each other. And I will say it's not for everyone, right? But like, it's okay if you don't feel that way towards your partner, right? If you're not like, oh, I want to hold their hand. And like, this feels like really like a sense of togetherness. And then we have this like great sex, but then we also get to go back to our own individual lives. And it's just kind of like a fun weekend thing. Like, I just really wanted to encourage people, like, again, if it doesn't look heterosexual, monogamous, fairy tale, like storyline, that it still is okay. As long as you're in a safe place and you feel respected and you're experiencing pleasure, like, do you?
Can I ask both of your opinions on something that I've always go back and forth about? Kind of like a tangent off this topic. Okay, when you have a partner who, like maybe you just started out as like sexual partners, you just hook up. I mean, this is very like, I think everyone has kind of gone through this. You make it very clear you're not interested in having any sort of committed anything monogamous. You make that clear from the bat. That person really wants that. And where do you think that falls in your personal responsibility of how to handle that? Is it just on them? And if they want to, keep torturing themselves and keep hooking up with you, even though what they really want is a monogamous committed relationship, is that just on them and you just get to keep enjoying it? Or do either of you feel like it's your responsibility to hold that other person's feelings and set the boundary of being like, no, I'm not going to hook up with you since you want it to be something more? I always struggle with this.
Yeah. Do you want to go? Do you want me to go?
Go for it, Taylor. You're the almost doctor.
So I've been in these situations.
Yeah.
And what I will say is that it is your responsibility to make sure that you are in a space respecting your boundaries. It's your responsibility to make sure that you are in a space that feels healthy and good for you.
Sure.
It's not up to that other person.
Sure.
So if you express, I only want a committed relationship, and that other person is saying, well, I really just want, something non-committed and just to have a sexual relationship with you, they might still try to engage with you. Sure. That's not their bad. Mm-hmm. If you disrespect yourself, if you do not honor yourself and honor your needs and continue down that line, hoping that they will change their mind, I will say that that's on you, that you are now showing that person how to treat you, right? That you're going to go against what your own needs are. And that if you're feeling like you want something and your partner is not in alignment with that, you have every right to say, okay, well then this isn't working for me. I could go along with this, but my needs wouldn't be being met. And on the other hand, right, say that you really want a sexual relationship and this partner is saying that they want something committed.
Yeah.
I do think it's not your responsibility if this person engages with you, right? Because that is up to them to honor themselves. But I would say that I would hope if you have the respect, if you have the care for this other person, that you would have a conversation with them about what it feels like for them to still engage with you, knowing that this is where you're at.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And being honest each step of the way about how those needs and how those desires might change, right? I think if you're saying, I really want a committed relationship, I'm not sure if you're the person I want that with yet, and I really enjoy being intimate with you, I want to explore that a little bit more. Sure, go for it. Both parties, that makes sense, right? That other person might come to a place where they say, oh, actually, I'm really enjoying this too. And I feel a really deep connection here. And, I'm feeling like I might want to explore the idea of being in a committed relationship with you. Great, right? But I think at the end of the day, it's always up to you to honor your needs. That person, sure, you might feel like they're being a jerk because they're still engaging with you, but like you also shared what you wanted, and then your behaviors went against what you said you wanted for yourself. And that then gave that person permission to still engage with you in that way and disrespect your own needs.
Right. And that's where I've always been like interested in is where does your responsibility fall? Like, do you disrespect that person knowing that they're disrespecting, like that they're not being true to themselves? It's tricky.
You can. You totally can. That's up to you, right? But I mean, I think obviously if you want to really act and engage in a way that is respectful, then yeah, you would disengage and you would say, I care for you and I enjoy these experiences with you, but I know that you want something more and that I'm not ready for that.
Yeah,
and it hurts me to see you, continue to engage with me. And I don't want to be, tempting you or teasing you with this when you might not, because to me, having a conversation like that and not engaging with that person, to me, is very respectful, right? It's not something that you have to do, but it is like practicing holding your partner in a high light, even when they're not holding themselves in a high light. And I think that's so important in any relationship. Like that's a hard lesson I've learned in my like committed relationships of like, I want a partner that's still going to hold me in a high light, even when I'm struggling to do that for myself.
Yeah. It's honestly just being selfless and like caring. Yeah. It's helping someone even when you don't necessarily have to.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. That's my take on it. Jess?
Yeah, no, I think that's...
I mean, I feel like you said it. I feel like you laid it out perfectly. Yeah, I mean, my thought too, the only thing is that like, when I'm thinking about being in the situation where someone is wanting something committed and I'm just wanting to have a sexual relationship, I would definitely agree with wanting to be selfless and like the constant communication of, okay, this is like not, you know, this is what you want and this is what I want. And I feel like they're completely different and I don't want to disrespect what you want in that way. But also just in an internal feeling, I'm thinking about past situations that I've had, even when I've been with someone who wanted a commitment and I just wanted to just have a sexual relationship, and that person would keep trying to broach even though I just wanted sexual. Like I started to feel, I feel like you feel it in your own being most of the time too, where I'm like, this just feels, even though I'm enjoying having sex with this person, kind of knowing that we're not on the same page because of our communication is making that clear, is kind of like messing up my space too, where I'm feeling like a cloud, and just even in my own personal being, like it's just feels better to just kind of let it dissipate.
And because now it feels like your needs aren't being respected.
Right.
That your wants aren't being heard or valued because now they're trying to push something onto you that you've already expressed. That's not where I'm at.
Right.
Yeah. And I will say too, like I've had experiences where I've communicated one thing and my partner has in words communicated wanting the same, but in actions and in their behaviors have shown me the opposite. And that was something really to like unpack there. And I think sometimes people, out of fear of losing access to you, will be in agreement with what you want because they would rather still get what they can without being honest with where they're at and potentially losing you.
Yeah, I've definitely been in that position too. Like as that person that's trying to cling on to something that's not going to happen, you know? Even though that person might have made it like abundantly clear and laid it out that it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and I've been like, I feel the same exact way. Just like dying to hang on.
To spend just 10 minutes with you, please.
But that's the thing with like the sexcations that I obviously, you know, you're not in control of if someone's not being honest in their communication. But with the sexcations, what I loved so much is this idea of communication around that type of sexual relationship. Because when I was thinking back, I'm like, there were so many moments, especially in my early 20s, where I'm like, I'm down with a one night stand, but there are certain people in my life that I just have a comfortable sexual relationship with, and it just feels natural. And I'd like to have moments where we have this communicated time where we're going to go to Palm Springs for 2 days and we're going to have sex, and that's what it is. And even if the intimacy goes farther, like you were saying, because we do have this comfortability and communication and connection with each other, but I just didn't have this like idea of how to make that happen. So it's like going back now, I'm like, oh my God, I would have had these moments for sure where Jessica wanted more than a specific or a one night stand with someone. I want the communication in this specific situation, and how healthy that would feel. Like we're both on the same page right now. This is both what we want. We're comfortable and safe with each other. Yeah. And I'm able to have my sexual needs met, and even maybe a little more emotional intimacy met. Yeah. And then that's what I need. And then I can go about my separate life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've never had a one night stand. It never felt safe for me. And for me, doing a sexcation is almost like an extended version of a one night stand. And I mean, I also don't drink. So I feel like a lot of people's one night stands is like, you know, going home after the bar or being drunk and whatnot. But for me, it is so important that like the sexual encounters that I have are meaningful. That for me, they're meaningful because I experience pleasure, because I experience a connection with that person, whether it's sexual, spiritual, emotional, that it feels meaningful in some way. And one night stands didn't ever feel that way for me. Like my perception of them, right? Of like, I probably coulda with him that first night that I met him, but I would have wanted more. And that for me is always my thing. Like I've never wanted to have sex with someone just one time, because if I'm going to have sex with them, I want it to be pleasurable and enjoyable, which means I would want to have more. So like, why put myself in a position where I would only have sex with them that one time and then never talk to them ever again. And that's to me where sexcations feel like a good compromise, an extended one night stand, where there is more communication and there is an abundance and a focus on pleasure. Like, I don't know, I think in my perception, you know, from movies and whatnot, like, and friends, that one night stands didn't actually have a focus on pleasure. That, and I think certainly for some people that they do, right? But
and maybe sometimes it's a different type of pleasure. Like for me, my one night stands have been more about like adrenaline rushes.
The adrenaline rush.
It's like not about. I'm not expecting to have an orgasm, which might sound kind of fucked up, but I'm going into it expecting like, no, I'm probably not going to like have the most mind blowing orgasm at all. But it's going to be a rush. You know, it's going to be a high, and it'll be fun, and that's pleasurable in a different kind of way. Right.
Totally. Yeah. And I'm like, for me personally, that wouldn't
be fulfilling for you. Yeah.
That, and maybe if I,
it doesn't have to, you know, it doesn't have to.
But but all of this to me is just like, it's just knowing yourself sexually, which I think is so like so cool. And it excites me to know that, like, you know, that this is now, these are conversations that are being had, because I think about like my daughter and I'm like, oh my God, we're going to be having these conversations with her. So she's going to like be growing up, learning about herself sexually, and like what for her feels right and doesn't feel right, and what she's comfortable with, instead of just like, here's the book, you can do this, this, and this, and you can't do these other things. And that's it. And then it's like, well, this stuff doesn't feel good to me. Doesn't matter. That's the only thing you can do, you know? Yeah. So it's just so cool. It's like, you know yourself sexually and then created the sexcation from it. And it's just, I just love that. I think it's so amazing.
Thanks. Yeah. I think it just comes down to like honoring your needs, honoring where you're at, right? Like checking in with yourself on that and communicating it. And if it's not in alignment, then it's not in alignment. And, you know, then either you take a pause from seeing that person and you revisit it later, or you just realize, you know, that person's not with it for you. It's, to me, it's like all these things should always be ongoing conversations, and trying to always be open to see where it can be fulfilling and feel safe and respectful and pleasurable for everyone involved. But it's emotional work for sure. Yeah. Individually and together.
Well, I really appreciate you putting it out there. And I know, like, Broads, it's on Taylor's highlights on her Instagram, and I binged through those, and it was very, like, even though I didn't participate in it, just being able to see you do it felt healing to me. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on today. It was awesome and fun, and the time flew by.
It's always so nice to talk to you. And okay, obviously, Broads, Taylor has the Let's Talk About It podcast. We'll link it all here. But anything else right now that you'd like to let our listeners know about?
One thing that was fun that we just did on the podcast was a Being Biracial series with a bunch of other people from Bachelor. So if people want to check that out.
Yes, and that's on your Patreon, right?
No, that's just on the actual podcast itself. But if you appreciate it, you can always Venmo. But no, on Patreon, I'm going to be doing like sex and relationship Q&As. And so like talking more about this kind of stuff, and kind of like debriefing my coursework as well from the PhD program. So it's kind of like you can get a little sneak peek in like sexology PhD program. And then doing some like Bachelor breakdowns and stuff. Like I usually don't talk about that kind of stuff, but there's just so much fuckery in the franchise that I'm like, we need to like have important conversations about these things. So yeah, going forward, I'm going to be doing like not even recaps, but like breakdowns of all of it. That'll be on there. And all of that's all linked on Instagram as well. So.
Amazing. Well, we'll link it in the episode notes. But Taylor, thank you so much. We so appreciate you.
Yeah.
Stay safe on the West Coast, baby.
Thanks. Doing my best. I might explore outside today. We'll see.
Start to wander through.
All right. And with that, chat soon, Broads.
Chat soon.